You are listening to Small Business Straight Talk with your host, Amber De La Garza. Amber is a sought-after coach, trainer, speaker, and writer who gives small business owners the straight talk on productivity, time management, business systems, leading your teams, strategic decision-making, and mindset. No BS, fluff, or overused jargon. Just actionable strategies to get results and succeed in business. And here is your host, Amber De La Garza, the productivity specialist.
Welcome and thank you for listening to the Small Business Straight Talk podcast. Today is episode 359, Digital Organization, Moving from Chaos to Calm with Shawn Lemon. If you're a small business owner who wants to learn effective business strategies, improve time management, and elevate productivity to maximize profits, reduce stress, and make time for what matters most, then you're in the right place, and I'm so glad you've joined me. Today, I'm excited because I get to introduce to you our guest, Shawn Lemon. Shawn is the founder of Digital Organizer and has spent the last 10 years helping make businesses digitally organized so that you can scale profitably without having to struggle with email, files, and project management. A teacher at heart, Shawn believes the biggest reason people struggle with their tech is because of a lack of understanding of the tools, which isn't surprising because they're constantly changing as technology advances. When not helping businesses operate more effectively, Shawn loves making pottery, riding motorcycles, and spending time with his wife, Madeline, and their son, Nico. Before we dive into today's conversation, I wanted to let you know that we can work together. If you've been a longtime listener of the podcast and you thought, what would it be like to work with Amber and have her inside my business, partnering with me, coaching me, holding me accountable, giving you strategic advice in your business, then we should talk. To learn more about my peak performance coaching program, and my group business coaching program, Leverage Lab, head on over to amberdelagarza.com. I look forward to connecting with you on a discovery call to find out if working together is the next right step. Be sure to head over to amberdelagarza.com. And now, let's meet our guest and get to the straight talk. Welcome to the Small Business Straight Talk podcast, Shawn. How are you today?
I'm doing so good. Thank you for having me. How are you?
Good. And I'm really looking forward to bringing this conversation to our listeners because this is the perfect podcast for what you're getting ready to serve up for us today. So before we get into all the good best practices and nitty-gritty of digital organization, I would love to learn more about you. So what is something that we didn't learn about you in your official bio?
Well, I did say that I'm a son or a father of a 2-year-old. So my son and I and my wife, we love to be outside. For us, this whole thing of what I do of trying to work more efficiently and help people get digitally organized is so that I can be outside, and I want you to be outside and do the things that you really love. And so I'm in my little cul-de-sac, running around and watching him play on his little scooter and different things like that. And I like riding motorcycles, and he loves riding his tiny little scooter. So he's got this little electric Vespa that he'll just ride around throughout the neighborhood, and waving at people, beeping, and it's just fun. That's what this is all about: is being outside and just
not behind the computer and digitally all the time, right?
Yeah. I mean, this stuff is great, but it's a tool. I don't want to live on it.
Yeah. It's ironic that you could have opened with anything, and it is 1:00 our time. My son is 14 and he's homesick today. And so I just got off lunch and I got a package from the front door and I was like, oh, it's such a beautiful day. And I hollered up and I said, I'll be out in 2 hours. I want you in the backyard getting some sunlight and fresh air before I get off today. Like that was mom's instructions for feeling better is go get some sun, go get some fresh air, get in the backyard. Yes. So that's the irony of your example is so perfect. Well, all right. So I am just interested a little bit before we jump into your expertise is your backstory and how did you become, how did you start this business specializing in digital organization? It's such a specific niche. And so I'm assuming there's some sort of background there on how you ended up serving your clients in this way.
Yeah. I worked at the Apple Store for 7 years, and I was the guy that if you bought a new Mac and you paid an extra $100, you could meet with someone to teach you how to use your Apple products. So I certified in everything, and I loved it. And I love teaching people. But what I found is a lot of people had a really hard time learning in the midst of a big mess. And
Mm,
when they'd get this new Mac, hoping for a fresh start and thinking that buying a new computer is going to solve it for them. And then all of a sudden that mess just got transferred to a new place and there was no one there to help. I was there to teach you features and how to
right.
use an app, but not how to apply it to your life and how to get this mess under control. And so that was not sitting with me well. And I love actually helping people do this. And so I started finagling the schedule so that people could work with me so I could do what the Apple Store wasn't really set up to do and no one else was doing. There's still
Mm.
hardly anyone else doing it. So after 6 years of wrangling the schedule and making everyone crazy, but I said, "Can you switch this and can you trade me clients at this time?" I said, "I got to start my own business," and that was 10 years ago.
Incredible. So you saw a pain point and definitely filled the market with your services. I also see this as a big challenge for business owners. In digital organization, it can be incredibly overwhelming.
Yeah,
Uh, because it literally is like whether you're in your business in that moment or not, it feels like the digital disorganization is mounting and getting bigger and bigger, whether you're interacting with it and not with or
that's right.
not. Whether it's your emails and passwords, your digital files. So, where do you recommend a client start? Because it's not generally one area or one tech stack that they are disorganized in.
Yeah, it's usually multiples. They all kind of feed into each other. And so
Yeah.
looking at the system as a whole is really important. Best thing to do, I think, would actually take my quiz on my website, and that kind of interviews you or asks you the questions of how well are these different systems working for you. That'll give you a good starting point. And so I'm trying to look for what's the one thing that if it were solved, it will give you the time and energy that you need to feed into the next thing that you need to tackle, because this is all about getting wins and building momentum, because it's a whole system that needs to be tackled and we can't do it all at once. So usually, if we're going to shorten the answer after the long one, email or files are the two typical places to start.
Yeah. Yeah. And can you share with me, in your perspective and experience of working with your clients, what are the benefits of prioritizing digital organization? And I say that as a huge proponent. I'm obviously think it's important
Yes.
myself, but I want to hear your insights on why would a business owner say, "Hey, I'm going to focus on this, not that." Like all the other things a business owner needs to do. Why is this one thing that would make a big impact or have a big ROI in the business?
So the first impact that you're going to feel is a sense of relief,
Mm,
because you know where things are and it gives you a feeling of control. And Tony Robbins says, get in your head, you're dead. Like in the Business Mastery, he would just say that over and over again. And it's just so true. When we feel overwhelmed and we can't find what we're looking for, and we just get into this like lizard brain of not being able to focus, then we don't make the best decisions.
mm.
We start flipping our priorities and changing what we're working on and driving the team crazy and giving them whiplash because we're chasing after the next thing. We need to be able to feel in control. And a fantastic way to feel in control is know exactly where you need to find that file. Know that we're not having to deal with duplicates and which version are you working on? Oh my God, I just spent 2 hours working on this, but I was working on the wrong PowerPoint. The person put it in the wrong folder, or I was working on an outdated version. It's these sorts of things that make us feel kind of crazy. And when it comes down to it, we can save hours a week easily through good email organization and a workflow. And I don't mean tons of folders. I mean just how you approach it and how you just flow through it and make it happen.
Yeah.
Files and email makes a really big difference on the stress.
Yeah. Time is money.
And I also like to prioritize the stress as well. So I echo everything you're saying. I don't think we can show up our best, which has how I define productivity is when we're showing up our best, when we are distracted, we're overwhelmed, we're stressed out. So the fact that this is not from in my world, organization is not the same as being productive. But man, it's such a supporting role,
It
meaning
plays a
it
huge supporting
allows
role.
you, to show up your best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard to put a lot of productivity tips into practice when it's mayhem. Like
Right.
a quick hack and a quick fix isn't going to actually make that big of a difference for you if it's just one piece of the puzzle and you're just solving this one problem. Meanwhile, for this one file, but all of your files, you can't find them easily. Once
Yeah.
you get that sorted, then those little hacks can save you a bunch of time and they're so much more effective.
Okay. I'd like to do some best practices. So let's start with the digital file best practices. Where do you want to start with best practices? And then it's a two-part question. Do you recommend a specific technology or program or app?
Yeah. So I'm platform agnostic, but I do have my preferences.
Mm-hmm.
So we can work with a lot of stuff. And I just hung up a call with someone who's, has issues with Google and not wanting, with privacy and terrorism and different things, and just kind of scared about using the Google platform and wanting to get away from it and on their own server. It's like, okay,
Valid.
I can work with that.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the end, the platform makes a difference in optimizing how you're working. But the most important thing is, how are you using the tool?
Right.
What's your folder structure look like? And do you have one place to find everything and to be able to share with it? And is it working in your style? If right now you're hiring a lot of contractors, you need to be able to use some sort of cloud service so that you can interact with them easily. So that said, I like Google Workspace best, but my two tops would be either Microsoft or Google when it comes to file storage, email, calendaring, contacts, and things like that. They really are just the best. And then I've got pros and cons for some of the others. So that's kind of my platform for files and emails and such.
Yeah.
Asana is what I like for project management, or ClickUp.
Mm-hmm. Those are my two top favorites as well.
Yes. And then for passwords, we love 1Password. That's kind of our main squeeze when it comes to passwords. I don't really like working with LastPass for how many times that they've been hacked, which a lot of good practices coming out of that. But still, just interacting with it, it's not that easy. I like 1Password best.
Okay. That's a nice challenge. So I have been with LastPass for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I've heard it, like the seeds planted. Like if I got hacked, I'll be like, I knew it. Like I knew it, but it's safe, but it's convenient and my team's on it. But you just reminded me, I really need to take a look at probably switching over. I'm always hesitant to switch over to different apps because this is what I teach. I'm like, use what you have, get really good at it, understand the features, don't keep hopping around. And with every good strategy, there's a light side and a dark side to that. And the dark side is I've stayed on that platform for quite some time, even though I know that there's been a few challenges.
Yeah, for sure. And I echo your sentiments of stop switching platforms, get good at one and go from there. And maybe go in and just change those passwords instead of switching to a whole new platform. But if you feel like there's some optimization that could be had, like integrating two-step verification codes, so that if your team needs to get into an account that the code is coming to you, to your text message, you can eliminate that by incorporating the two-step code into the login. So it'll fill that in for the user. So it really cleans things up. Marketers and financial people love that. Once you hook in that two-step code, it eliminates the problem.
All right, Shawn, it's happening. We're switching over by the beginning of the year. It's October, the end of October right now. We're switching over because that is the only thing that feels broken in that system. And it's been more recent when, more and more apps are going to 2FA, but that has been an issue with my team for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that'll solve it. It's very, very easy to change platforms. You can export it, pull it all in, and then just put them in the right folders or vaults from there, and share it with your team.
All right. Thank you.
Cool.
All
You're
right. This
welcome.
isn't about me. It's about my listeners, but that was a great one. That is my actionable from today's episode.
Yes. Cool.
All right. Let's go back to Google Workspace. I have seen over and over again, or heard, I'll say I have heard over
Okay.
and over again, my client saying, I saved it. I don't know where I saved it to.
Yes.
It feels like Google is like a black hole. And I even think that. And I'm pretty darn organized. And I know what fixed it for me to better interact with the Google Workspace and saving my files was Google Desktop. And
Yes.
looking at it through that, like that was a game changer. That's why I stayed with it.
Yeah.
And I just realized so many people don't know about Google Desktop and
That's
how different that user experience is than going online to see your, I guess, digital workspace, lack of a better word. Yeah.
Well, so you are so right in that a lot of people have a hard time with Google and things getting lost and feeling like it's a black hole. And I think the number one reason for that is the shared with me section. So if you go to Google Drive and you look over on that left-hand side, you're going to see My Drive. You might see shared drives underneath, depending on if you're on Google Workspace Business Standard or higher. So it depends on the subscription. We'll get to that. And then underneath there's shared with me, and then there's trash and other things like that. And of course, they have starred. But two big ones are My Drive and shared with me.
Yeah.
When I share a file with you, it shows up in shared with me automatically. That's the master list showing you everything that's been shared. It's also a master list of any public link that you click on. So if I were to share a just public link to a PDF guide with you, and you clicked on it and it was hosted on Google Drive, even if you don't save it, it's going to show up in the shared with me section. So you'll see things that weren't emailed to you, so to speek.
Yeah. I mean,
So
this
what's
has got
that?
to drive you crazy too. Like, this is the section that drives me crazy.
Now that I know why it's there and how to interact with it,
Yeah.
I appreciate it, because everything that's shared with me, I don't want to add to my folder structure. I don't want to see it.
Yeah.
And I may just want to reference it, or maybe I do want to save it, in which case I can create a shortcut. And so you can drag a file that's in the shared with me section into My Drive to put it in a folder that you actually want it to live in, and that will create a shortcut.
And the reason you can name it any way you want.
And you can name it whatever you want. That's right, because most people don't name files well, and I'm a stickler about file naming, as I'm sure you are.
Yeah.
So we gotta move it into the right folder so that we can access it when we want it. And people just don't realize that's what that's there for, because you can be spammed, and we get most of us get more stuff shared with us than we actually want to keep. And so this way we don't actually have to have it cluttering up our visual space and having to organize it. So that is the sharing space. So from there, and then the reason why it's a shortcut and the reason why it works that way is because Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive, Box.com, all of these services, when you are working in just a gmail.com, like a free or a cheap account, it's all based on individual ownership. If you share a folder with me and I put a file in your folder, I still own it, unless we're using the business subscription and we're doing it right, which most people are not. So what they don't realize is if you hire me temporarily for a project and I don't know what I'm doing, and then I shut down that little freelance business that I was doing, and I delete that account, it deletes the files from your folder. So
and the person that received it thought it was theirs. Like, they're seeing it on their computer, so they think it's there. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, this happens a lot. Like, my CPAs would share with me through Google Drive. And as soon as I would get it, I would make sure I'm copying it all over. I'm like, I know I'm seeing it, but I know it's not mine. But that's a hard concept for a lot of people to like understand, because it's so different than how, it worked before, I guess,
Mhm.
Google
And
Workspace.
that's why Google is starting to call them shortcuts, and they're putting different icons on it. So they're trying to make
Mm,
it more visual so that you understand what's happening, because this is also happening on all of the other platforms as well. You're
yeah.
just not used to seeing it in the same way. They represent it visually a little bit differently, but it's all the same way. Now, how we solve that is we need to get on Google Workspace Business Standard or higher. So you have to pay a little bit more for your subscription, and then you get access to a different type of folder called shared drives.
Yeah.
And what's different about shared drives is when you invite me to a shared drive and I put a file in your folder, you own it. It's your folder. When I'm interacting with it, you own everything inside of it. And this is why business subscriptions are actually really important. This is one of those things I do not recommend trying to hack your way around and save expenses.
Mm,
This is our digital rent, people. Like, these are the tools that we have to use. This is the
yeah.
mechanic snap-on truck. Like, we're buying quality tools for a reason, because when you pay thousands of dollars for someone to create some ClickUp system for you and create all this standard operating procedures of how to use it, you better own that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you don't know to make copies, then that's just extra work for you. Get on the right subscription, do it the right way, and you never have to worry about it.
Yeah, the great advice. The shared drives for me was really helpful when I went in and reorganized everything a few years ago,
Mm-hmm.
was separating and doing shared drives so that I was blocking team members out of certain data.
Yes. Yep.
And it felt the most secure way of doing that. So I have like business documents and financials is under one drive, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
the only user that has access, right?
Right.
Because I don't want them looking at all the financials.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, everything else is under just strictly administrative. And then we have a whole like file folder structure under that, because anybody on the team can access that. But there is a need for a lot of businesses to separate out and have very clear roles with who has access to what kind of data.
Yeah, absolutely. That brings us back to best practices, which I got into talking about platforms of. But in best
Yeah.
practices, typically what we're setting people up with is a folder structure, kind of starting with the general domains of a business. If you're a client-based or project-based, like, you need to have a place for that. But then we always have operations, HR, financial, and in different folders like that.
Mhm.
And so setting up that baseline, and then we can modify from there. Like, if we have got a larger team, you have a financial team, but then you also have a different level of financial reporting that only the executive should see. So we may need to create a different spot, which is executive financial.
Right.
And then we also have different things that are contextual specifically for our business. Like, maybe this is operational, but this touches uh, 3 different departments. And so kind of keeping that in mind of how does your business run, and who's all involved in that, and how are you working on it? So that's kind of the thought process going into creating a good folder structure is, let's think of this like a physical workshop. What do we need to group together?
Mhm.
So for
Yeah, to be
example,
more efficient, like working
yeah,
through the workshop,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, I like to make pottery. So we have wet work, we have like halfway, and then you've got to glaze it and things like that. Different sets of tools, and all those things are grouped together.
Yeah. What are best practices around team members creating new folders? When you've created this beautiful file folder structure,
Yes.
does anybody get to create a folder? Like, what are some best practices around that?
Yeah. So I think it depends on the team and how large they are. And so the smaller your team, the more leeway you can have. The larger the team, the more strict you need to get. And then you need to have some gatekeepers for that. So does anyone get to create a folder? It needs to be in line with the rest of the folder structure of how it works.
Mhm.
So if you know, um, oh gosh, building a second brain. Tiago Forte. So if you know Tiago Forte, he has this whole concept of para, and one of them is he's big on archiving, and I love that concept of having archives all over the place. So if we have a folder for our clients, well, when we get a new client, we need to go ahead and create a new folder for them. And then, so that's one of those things like, yeah, you can create a new folder as long as it's a client. And if it's a brand new project, yes, you can create a folder for that. But otherwise, we want to have a good folder structure of what should typically be in this project file. And that kind of acts as our template, and we don't want to deviate from that much.
Yeah, absolutely. What is your recommendation on the cleanup? So we referenced chaos and a mess earlier in our conversation. Do you believe that they should clean it all up? Or is there like a junk drawer and they start fresh?
Yeah. So if you want to clean it all up, unless you've only been in business for a few months, like it might be it might be a pretty big lift to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact is, like, the 80-20 rule applies to this in that the majority of the stuff that we've created, we're not using regularly. And so my priority for the clients that we work with is to start with what's relevant now and what's going to set you up for the future. So I don't want to know what everything is and account for every single file and phase of business or life that you've ever been through at the very beginning. We want to think of what's important now, what are you working on, and what is all this? And that's the folder structure that we're setting up. But I want to, before we even get to that new folder structure, I want you to purge and find stuff that you need to delete first. Let's go through these folders, delete after that. Let's archive the things that are not relevant right now. And you're not going to access it frequently or, really need it in the course of work going forward. Let's get that out of the way. Now let's focus on that smaller subset of files.
I agree. I agree so much. There's just no ROI in going backwards like that or that far back.
Yeah.
And I was hoping you were going to say something like that, but I really wanted you to share that message with our listeners because I think this is a barrier to getting started because our brains say, we're going to have to organize it all. It's such a huge project. Like, where would I even start? And then we don't start. And so if we can really, reframe that and position it to be simpler, that it's now and into the future, then you can start at any time, no matter, how big of a mess you may have currently. I have an email management class that I teach. It's on demand. It's a master class. And one of the modules is called Chapter 13. So I teach them how to do a Chapter 13 bankruptcy on their inbox.
Yeah.
Just meaning you only have to pay back so much debt where there's no ROI on this. And so you're only going to go back so far where you're not getting a return. There's nothing you need to do. They're so old. And then you archive those. And I can't tell you, I've had this, seriously, I've had this master class for probably 8 to 10 years. And that is the thing that people are like, what? You're giving me permission to not answer all these emails?
Yeah.
And the answer is, yeah, you have 70,000 in your inbox. At what time did you think you were going to answer them all or organize them all or 10,000 or, several thousand? It's just not the best use of your time.
It's not.
Yeah. So now and into the future, what is the system that's going to set you up for success?
That's right. And we do the same thing for email. It's like, what is that cutoff? Yeah. It's how many times do you have people actually pushing back on that?
Never. They're like, what?
Really?
I'm allowed to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I teach it as archive. It's still searchable. They're still there. They were a mess in your inbox. Let them be a mess in a subfolder that you archived, right? Let's start with a fresh start so that you are learning a new way of interacting with your inbox. You're not living in it, but it's much more organized.
Yeah.
No, I actually don't get pushback. It's the opposite. It's like, I never did it because I thought I had to do it all or do it perfect. And it's like, that's not what this is about. Yeah. This is about, honestly, what you were sharing earlier of the benefits is about your freedom, your less stress. Let's make it easy. This does not need to be complicated. Even in my area, productivity, time management, this is not rocket science strategies. Those don't actually work in the real world. You got to keep it simple. And what I'm hearing from you, just the conversation we're having is simple works. Then it's consistently changing the behavior of how you interact with that system on a continual basis.
I don't think I can preach that long or hard enough. It's about keeping it as simple as possible. It's not about the features. It's not about what these apps can do. It's not about the next hack or automation. Automations are us figuring out what the system should be and making it as efficient as possible. And, it's people think, oh, so let's set up these email templates so that I can answer these questions really quickly. Well, first off, answer the question well, create a template, and then forward that to your web developer and say, I keep getting this question. We haven't answered it well on the website. We need to fix this.
Get to
How
the
are
root
we
of the
going to
challenge.
incorporate this in so I don't get those emails in the first place?
Yeah.
For me, overhauling my email personally, because is as little junk as I get, which is almost nothing, only emails from real people. I was still drowning in email about 4 years ago. And it was someone coming in on my team saying, why are you answering these emails? Like, we shouldn't be answering this. And we changed how we did the business and how we interacted with people so that, number one, I could get paid for those calls because I was working. It took me a lot of time to answer all of these questions. And in the end, some of it was, let's set up a call. Here's a link.
Right.
And, it's like I made people happier by not answering their questions because this doesn't belong in an email conversation. This belongs in a face-to-face, or I need to see your screen.
Right. Something similar, something that changed how we interact with people is our autoresponder.
Yeah.
So I answer a lot of questions in the autoresponder, pointing them back to the right page on the website if it's this, if you're this. And literally the end's like, if you're a client, or actually it's the beginning. I'm like, if you're a client, you're in the perfect place. We'll get back to you. But if you're not, and it's all of these other things, here's where to go to get quicker, more effective answers and responses. And what that did for me is release the guilt of having to be like, please go fill out the form. Please go submit here. Please go inquire here. Mm-hmm. It may be short and sweet emails, but it's time. It's compounded. It's over and over. It's clutter in your inbox. And now I just delete like really quickly. So to your point, if they didn't find it where it was on the website, it did get into your inbox. I don't feel guilty about repointing them to the website because that's what my autoresponder did.
Yeah, I loved it. When I got it, I was like, oh, wow. And I love that it sets the expectation on the other side. I think so much of email, too, of a lot of people feel pressure to email and respond quickly when it doesn't necessarily have to be a response from you quickly. It could just be an autoresponder, setting the expectation of when you can handle that. Or if you don't want to go that far, saying, hey, I got this. I've got time on Thursday morning to answer this. I'll get back to you then.
Yeah. I mean,
that's off your plate. Snooze it for Thursday morning and answer it then.
Yeah. Setting the expectation is really important. See, this is with a cross section between systems and platforms and tech and, productivity. When I specifically teach my clients on email management, it's not about getting to inbox zero. It's about finding a way to interact with your inbox so that you can actually do what matters, right? And the high value activities.
Right.
And so there's different strategies to do that, but setting expectations, and especially with your clients, because those are the ones we feel most pressured from. It's like when they have a question, when am I going to get back to them? So, I mean, to your point as earlier, this starts all the way back from my discovery call to my client agreement to my first onboarding call. I'm reiterating things along the lines of setting expectations. How do you get in contact with me? How quick do I respond? Who do you contact on my team for certain things? So that if I have to remind them, it's just a gentle reminder. It's not a first conversation when they're like, okay, thanks, but can you answer my question now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. All right. Any other best practices? Can we talk about either email or we talked a little bit about password management, but maybe you even get into, I jumped the gun and just said, I am already using something, but most people aren't using anything. So what are some best practices with those two areas?
So with email, you've already talked about declaring email bankruptcy. I love that. I want to think about my calendar when it comes to email. When should I be answering some of these emails that are not urgent right now? So when we need a little extra time, sometimes if it's going to take 10 minutes to answer that email, we've got the time, we can do that right then. But if we don't, when do we have time filled in on our calendar or blocked off on our calendar to be able to answer those things? And then if we can use an app like Spark or something that allows us to snooze emails for a certain day and time, can we say, snooze that for my Thursday morning block when I answer these types of emails? So I really love snoozing an email when it's not something that I need to deal with right now, but that has to be paired with me actually creating time in my calendar to doing it. Otherwise, it's just a procrastination method, and why I didn't like snoozing at first until it got paired with the calendar.
Yeah. Asana has a great integration with either Outlook or Gmail to where you can create a task from your inbox.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that because the way I teach it is then you schedule your tasks onto your calendar.
Yep.
So either way works, right? You're batching and you're saying, hey, this is my email time. So now you're just snoozing them to that block of time. Or you're putting them in your task management system so that you can organize them in priority of all the other things you need to do. And now you've scheduled time to do so.
Yep.
I find that to be really helpful. And I agree. Anything that's going to be 10 or 15 minutes, you should have been out of your inbox already, processing it, not, doing the actual work. Because if we stay in our inboxes, that becomes our to-do list.
Right.
And I don't know about you, Shawn, but my highest value activities, my high priority activities are not always found in my inbox, but it's so easy to live in your inbox and then you never get to your to-do list.
That's right. Yeah. And I like the Asana integration as well. We use Asana and use it for that. And we usually start with snoozing because not everyone has the project management and we get to that. So it's like, here's how to get there first, but it's figuring out, is this an email activity or is this actually an Asana activity or more part of a project? So sometimes we'll split. Depends on who we're working with to really adapt it. And some people are resistant to using project management. So kind of work with them to adapt that to make it.
No, I love having that option because you're right that the idea and the strategy of batching like tasks together, responding to emails is a much simpler way than saying, let's integrate it into a task management system that doesn't exist yet. So you gotta give both options.
Yep. And I love it. What are some other best practices for email? I would say choosing when you're planning on checking your email or processing your email, really not checking, but processing it. So when are you going to do that? For me, I typically start my days at 9. I'm not starting an email. I'm starting with my calendar and my Asana and anchoring myself in what are my priorities before I open myself to the world and their requests, and then start, activating different areas in my brain of, oh, there's this, there's that. So what do I need to be focusing on first? So that would actually be a 10 o'clock activity for me. And then after lunch at 1 o'clock, and then about 4 o'clock if I'm wanting to wrap up by 5. So I want to look at email an hour before I'm wrapping up my day. And if it comes in after that, they're just not getting answered. So by creating those limitations on yourself, you have to process your email faster and you have to use some of these other best practices. And then you've got a lot more time to focus on things that are more important.
Yeah, I agree. I also teach that as well. And I think that, every person and every business is different. So if you can get to 3 times a day, 2 times a day, some of my clients need to start with the top of every hour, right? Mm-hmm. Some of my attorney clients that things are really time sensitive and things are coming and going. And so we find the cadence that works. But man, there's so many benefits to it. So when we're talking about setting expectations for clients, you're like so clear when you're communicating, you know what? I'm able to return if you email me today, it will be returned by the end of the day. Well, how can you say that? Because you've got 3 spots in the day that you're going to be responding. And returning an email, you gave this example earlier, I want to highlight it, doesn't mean answering the entire question and doing the research and the task that came in. It's thanks for your email. I got it. I can look at it again, or I can have it to you by the end of the week. Is answering an email that it's not going unresponded to for some indefinite amount of time. Mm-hmm. And so it builds up this confidence to know that when you say things like, sure, email me and I can get back to you in 1 business day or 2 business days, you now have the process to go behind it to make that happen.
Yeah.
The other benefit too that I've seen too is that when we're saying words like don't live in your inbox, which are easier said than done. You and I both know that, right?
Yeah,
But it's
totally.
still good advice. Is that if you don't know when you're going to be in your inbox again, our brains start like short circuiting, and it can't answer the question of if not now, when. And if you don't have the answer to if I don't look at this now, when, then you're going to do it now. And that's not always the right answer. And so by having these scheduled blocks of time, your brain can be like, oh, this is totally not important. Like this can wait 2 hours. This can wait 3 hours. And then you're not stressed out about it because you can answer, I know when I'll be there again. I know when I'll be processing my emails again.
Yeah, 100%. And if I pull back a little bit and think about the rest of the day, so it can be scary to say, I'm going to get back to you by this time, because what could go wrong in between
All the
now
things,
and
yes.
then? And if we look at the other tools that we're using, if we have a hard time finding what we're looking for, that slows us down. What are the bumps in the road that can stop us from being able to execute that? So that's where looking at organization as a whole becomes really important. And also, again, your calendar, like there has to be space to be able to deal with emergencies if you're an attorney, or if you're a doctor, to be able to return phone calls in a certain amount of time and things like that. We need to have those blocks, but then we also have to have all of the things working together really smoothly. And it makes me think about the conversation that I had to drop my car off this morning because there's a crack in my windshield. And so I'm talking to the guy from the body shop who's driving me home. He's giving me a ride out. And we're just talking about how the body shop works and how absolutely everyone needs to be firing on all cylinders to really be working well and for them to crank out the money. And when everyone is working in sync with each other, you got to have the service writer putting in things, getting that right, to then the prep, to then the body work, to then the pain, and go through this whole system. Everyone is relying on each other. And there is no panacea to this. We need to be organized in all of our different areas and working efficiently, but kind of work on them one at a time. And a big part of that is the calendar too, and realizing that we have to be realistic about how much time things actually take, and that it makes a lot more sense to actually try and shave off an extra 10, 15 minutes here and there because everything is so organized and you can find what you're looking for immediately.
Absolutely. Well, that is very well said on the importance of why digital organization is important in all areas. If you can't get into the app, you can't find your password, you lost the email, you didn't respond to the client, you lost the contract, you redid a document, your team can't find the document. All of that is costing us time and money. And so this isn't always the funnest or the sexiest thing to do in our businesses, but I will say it is absolutely essential to being able to be efficient, effective, and productive. I would like for you to close this out by sharing a little bit about your services, because I believe you have a done with you service where if someone's like, yeah, I'm on board, raise my hand. I know it's a little chaotic and I know I need this, but I am not going to be the one in there creating the file folder structure. Like maybe my brain doesn't work that way. I need more hands-on help. Can you share a little bit about your services?
Yeah. So we work in 4 primary areas: email, files, passwords, project management. You do those really well, and you're cooking, and you know how to use some of these other tools for a precise thing. And so when we work with a client, we don't do it for you because we don't know anything about your business. And while best practices exist, each of us have our different tendencies in the way we have our own process and what's important to us and how we think about things. And so we've developed a system that we take you through step by step based on principles, but you're working with us to figure out how this actually applies to you, and then doing it together so that when you hit those roadblocks that are typical in a course of, cool, but how do I apply this to this situation? We're doing that over and over again. So we teach you how to actually think about organization in the first place. So this is your system. So this is your knowledge in your nervous system because you've actually been doing some of the actions yourself. So oh yeah, we take you start to finish to get organized and in those different areas. And we typically work with people on a month-to-month basis and work with them between 1 and 4 months.
Excellent. And so to find out more about your services and how they can work with you, where do they find you?
thedigitalorganizer.com.
Excellent. We'll be sure to share the link in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for being here. You also said you had a freebie, something you wanted to add on for our listeners.
Yeah.
I got a sneak peek at it, so I want to make sure they get it.
Thank you. So we've been talking about some best practices for file organization, but I have pulled all that together in a guide for you. This is what we teach our clients. So if you want to self-implement, you want to see how it works and try and apply it to your situation, you can do that. It's the actual step-by-step. I've got video examples. I've got naming conventions and all that stuff for you. So it's really good and actionable and you can apply it. And we've got some other tips for you as well that would come in just the few kind of introduction emails. So I think that would be a perfect starting place is to go to that page and download it and we'll get you that guide.
Awesome.
So,
and do you have the link for that directly?
It's thedigitalorganizer.com/straight talk.
Thank you so much. We'll be sure to have all these links available in the show notes as well as to our email list. Thank you so much for all of the best practice tips today, Shawn.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me.
I have loved having you listen to this episode of the Small Business Straight Talk podcast. And I sure hope you found my conversation with Shawn to be valuable and insightful. But most importantly, that you can take action on what you learned today within our conversation. No change. Without taking action, nothing will change for you or your business. Digital organization is such a pain point for so many business owners. And oftentimes this is not taken action upon because it feels like such a big, huge project. My advice to you is to pick one simple thing to get started on. Use that momentum and then go to the next and the next. You can either start with the thing that's causing you the most pain point, or you can start with something that feels smaller and that you can take action on and complete in a short period of time. Either way, there is no right or wrong way to get started. Just get started. If you are challenged with email overwhelm, you may be interested in my Conquer Your Email Masterclass. The masterclass is $47. It's on demand. It comes in 3 parts. I not only teach you how to interact and how to work within your inbox very differently than you currently are, but I also teach you a framework to keep your inbox organized, along with how do you get there if you have hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of emails in your inbox. This simple framework that I teach inside my email management masterclass has helped people with 70 emails and 70,000 plus emails in their inbox. And this is a sustainable solution, not a one-stop shop quick fix, and then your inbox is full again. You will learn a new way to manage your inbox. Head on over to amberdelagarza.com/conquer your email. Again, that's amberdelagarza.com/conquer your email. We'll have links in the show notes, so you can head on over to amberdelagarza.com/359. If you are new here, I want to welcome you to the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss another episode. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with another fellow business owner who you think would find it valuable. So that's my straight talk for today. Until next time, have a productive week.